Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some really disappointing news from the NCAA and the college football landscape as both Darrell Jackson Jr., a defensive tackle from Florida State, and UNC wide receiver Tez Walker, two guys who playing on ACC contending teams, two guys who are going to play a meaningful role in both of these programs, were denied eligibility to play in the 2023 season by the NCAA. And a lot of the conversation on this channel has to do with taking deep dives into programs, talking personnel, talking scheme. This is going to be a little bit more of a college football fan conversation. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section. I know it's not a perfect situation. I know there has to be some sort of regulation on the transfer portal as it relates to college football, but I'd be lying. I think a lot of people who are listening would be lying if they weren't just somewhat frustrated with just a lack of consistency the NCAA shows in regards to student athletes pertaining to the transfer portal. Now, before we get into it again, just want to say thank you to you guys. It's truly been a blast talking college football with all of you. I always say it, the best part about doing this is just hearing what you guys have to say in the comment section, chopping it up with you guys. So let me know in the comment section what you guys think. Subscribe to the channel if you do enjoy the content. And let's get into it. Now, I first want to start with the how much college football has changed in the last couple of years. Not only the transfer portal, but now you have NIL. Now you throw in conference realignment, and there's so many moving parts regarding college football, and it just seems like the NCAA continues to take away the power of the student athlete. Right? You take Devontae Walker's situation, the UNC wide receiver, tears his ACL coming out of high school, ends up having to go to North Carolina Central, where they cancel the season due to COVID. Transfers to Kent State, balls out for 2 years, really does earn that right to be one of the top commodities in the transfer portal. He ends up going to UNC where he can go catch passes by Drake May. And mind you, part of the reason he's transferred to Kent State is two reasons. One, his head coach just packs up and leaves and takes an offensive coordinator job at Colorado. And I'm not getting at Sean Lewis. I get why he would want to take that job. That being said, how are we going to let coaches pack up and leave after these players commit to them and then turn around to the players and say, oh, you would like to transfer from this school, but you're going to have to sit out a year? It really doesn't seem fair. The autonomy of these student athletes as it regards to the transfer portal, they don't seem to have it at all. And then on top of that, Tez Walker's talking about transferring to North Carolina so he can be closer to his grandma who's going through medical conditions. Darrell Jackson in a very similar story, right? Commits to Maryland, transfers down to Miami, and then comes back to Florida State, back where he grew up, because he wants to be closer to family who's going through medical conditions. And it's frustrating to see everything changing around college football and just the lack of consideration and the lack of control these student athletes have who really do make the sport run. I mean, we would not have college football if it weren't for these student athletes, and they just have such limited control. And you even take out the personal aspects of it, right? Coaches being allowed to take jobs whenever they please. I mean, I'm not saying they shouldn't have that right to do it, but you should be able to transfer, or you should have some sort of power if you're a player who committed to that coach to hit the transfer portal and to go play for a coach that you would like to be committed to. Now, the second part is conference realignment. And that's another element of just the changing world of college football. And I mean, you can say you commit to the Oregon Ducks and you want to play in that Pac-12 region, play in California, play in Oregon, play in Washington, be on that West Coast because that's where your family's from. And then all of a sudden, the program that you committed to in the class of 2023, you're going to be playing in the Big Ten. You're going to be traveling across, and we're only talking about college football, not how this pertains to every other NCAA sport, which it's a lot harder, right? And you saw Coach Drinkowitz talk about a college softball team. They're flying commercial. I mean, it's really, really hard for some of these smaller programs to make this work. But getting back to the college football landscape of things, now you're all of a sudden playing completely different teams in completely different areas. And it's just not the same situation that you committed to. And again, the NCAA being super strict on whether you can transfer, whether you cannot. And then you talk about NIL. You add NIL into it where it's like there's a lot of bad actors in NIL, promising money that's not going to be there, promising NIL deals that might fall through, and say you're sold on a really good NIL deal, which I think it'd be crazy for us. One of my pet peeves, side note, is when fans are critical of these young student athletes committing to a school for NIL money. That's life-changing money for them and their family. How are we going to criticize them for making that decision? But say you do decide to commit to a school because of some NIL promises that are made. And we both all recognize that there are bad actors in this NIL space, right? Promising money that's not going to be there, promising deals that are not really going to be fulfilled. And you commit to a school and you're not getting that money, you're not getting the situation you were promised. And again, you won't have the ability to transfer to another situation. So that the moral of the story is, in a landscape of college football that is changing, whether you like the changes or not, the college football landscape is changing, and it doesn't seem to be really supporting the student athletes that make college football run. Now, getting into the personnel of both these misses, let's start with Darrell Jackson at Florida State, where he was going to be a meaningful part of that two deep on that Florida State defensive line. Mike Norvell went out and got Braden Fisk, brought Darrell Jackson because they needed some more depth on the defensive line. Now, if you're Florida State, you're hoping that some of these other guys can step up. Daniel Lyons, Dennis Briggs, Malcolm Ray, some of the Joshua Farmer I throw in there. Hopefully some of those guys can step up and provide some of that two deep. And at UNC, Devontae Walker, you take a look at some preseason numbers, preseason lists. He was supposed to be a first-team All-ACC kind of guy. He was supposed to kind of replace Josh Downs and all that production for Drake May. And from what you heard out of spring camp and what you heard out of early fall practice, Tez Walker was going to be a truly special wide receiver. And now he's not eligible to play in 2023. Two massive blows for two teams that are both going to be in my top 25. And if you've been listening to me, Florida State has been extremely high on my board heading into the 2023 season. And a lot of that has to do with the depth on the defensive line. Now, I'm not out on Florida State because Darrell Jackson can't play. That being said, it significantly shakes up what Florida State wants to do on the defense side of the ball. And at UNC, now you're going to be relying on Georgia Tech transfer Nate McCullum, right, to be that wide receiver one. And both these choices, and I have a funny feeling that we're going to be talking to Eric Gilbert too soon, right? He's applying for a waiver to the NCAA, clearly trying to send a message to college football that they're going to be really strict in the transfer portal. And just the timing of it makes absolutely no sense, right? You're talking about all these things changing in college football, and now you're picking the time to really crack down on these kids trying to transfer to different schools with all the moving parts that we see in college football, right? Conference teams are able to change the conferences seemingly overnight. Coaches can take jobs at the drop of the hat, and we're not letting these college football players transfer to other programs to find the best fit for them. And that's besides the fact that these kids are committing when they're 16, 17 years old. These are young kids who are still trying to figure out who they are and what situation works best for them. And we're going to be super strict on them changing their minds when they're 20-year-olds, not to mention other things in that situation. Now, I'll slow myself down. I'm getting just a little bit worked up. I understand that the NCAA has to have some sort of transfer portal regulation, right? You don't want kids just going from school to school to school to school just because they want to find some playing time. That's not best for the kid. That's not best for the sport. I think we all agree on that. That being said, the lack of consistency, the ability to just change they've been changing the transfer portal rules all like the last couple months. So these kids are in the portal and not really sure if they're going to be able to play because the rules keep changing. At the end of the day, we just need some more consistency. I think this would sit a little bit better with college football fans if we saw that consistency across the board, but some people get the waivers, some people don't. The NCAA is certainly not coming out with the statement saying why they denied this kid and why they let this kid play. That's the most frustrating part about it, the lack of transparency that the NCAA has. And so two really disappointing decisions, two guys that I think were really going to be good football players in the ACC conference, not able to play in the 2023 season. We'll see how it impacts both these teams. Maybe we'll do some specific videos on UNC and some specific videos on Florida State, but wanted to hop on, give you guys my thoughts on what's happening in college football, especially as it pertains to the transfer portal. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys as usual. And if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Would love to hear you guys' comments or your thoughts in the comment section. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.